All right. Well, welcome to our Child Care Count series on starting a child care business. We are very fortunate to I'm Chloe Learey. I'm the director of the Winston Prouty Center, and I'm really excited to talk to folks who help small businesses get started. So thank you all for joining me. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves quickly and say where you work, and then we're just going to jump in and have a conversation about how do you start a business. So Debra, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Chloe. So nice to be here. And hello, Eyad. My name is Debra Boudrieau. I work for the Vermont Small Business Development Center. Small Business Development Center is a nationwide organization funded annually out of Congress that offers in each state does things a little bit differently, but all basically offer the same service, which is one-on-one, confidential, no cost business advising to people who are considering starting a business or are already in business. And depending on the time of year and the economic climate, sometimes we have more existing businesses than we have startups, but it really doesn't matter to us. We have training, we're certified in both, and we're here to help. Our motto is that you can be in business for yourself, but you don't have to be in business by yourself. Vermont is primarily made up of what is now being called solopreneurs. So it can be sometimes, a little daunting to do this entirely by yourself. So that's what we're here for.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Eyad.
Hey, Chloe, thank you so very much for having me on the call. Hey, Debra, lovely seeing you again. My name is Eyad Salha, and I'm the Business Technical Assistance Provider here at BDCC, Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. BDCC is one of the 12 RDCs in Vermont, and we serve the Windham region area. I'm part of the business team here at BDCC. We are composed of 3 members, actually, the director, myself, and my coworker, Reagan, who deals with the intake and project development phases.
Great. And so actually you two know each other and work together. How do you overlap? Let's just start there in terms of how you coordinate and work together on helping folks starting up a business or doing a business.
Well, there's certainly more than enough small business to go around. So, we refer back and forth. We typically do not, and we do this again because the need is great and our time is limited. We don't work with the same people at the same time. Part of that is also that, I think it's both of our philosophies that we can always call each other in if necessary, but you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen at any one time. You sort of want to, it's a lot of information sometimes for someone to take in. And so just finding the right avenue in for all of this information. So, but we work closely with the regional development corporations across the state. There have been times when we've actually been embedded in their offices for some time of our day. BDCC happens to be growing so fast that I'm no longer there. But, essentially, we still walk down the hall and talk to each other.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yes, indeed. And if I might add also, the titles or what we provide for small businesses and entrepreneurs might be very similar in terms of providing advice and supporting them through that process so they're not walking alone, as Debra has mentioned earlier. But also we have, I don't know if Debra would agree, we have this extra layer here at BDCC where we can provide also loan, and we have loan programs specifically for startups and entrepreneurs in order to start and kick off their businesses off the ground.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And VTS BDC is not a lending agency. So when we look at a project, certainly the BDCC and what they offer and the other RDCs and what they offer and other alternative lenders and programs and commercial lending is all part of the mix that we look at.
Mm-hmm.
Eyad happens to have a group of things right at his fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
We look at the whole range because we have to.
Mm-hmm.
So, because we don't lend.
Mm-hmm. So you might know all the financial resources, and Eyad might be a person you refer to specifically if you're like, ooh, I know a good match for you.
Right. But Eyad also knows everybody else. But, the players in Vermont, luckily, I mean, the beauty of Vermont is that it's a small state.
Mhm.
And I mean, I really think of Vermont as a small town. When I go out nationally and talk, I mean, I'm usually talking to other advisors across the country who have, entire district, their client base that they can work with is larger than the state of Vermont. So, it's always interesting. So I think of Vermont as a small town.
Mhm.
And I always encourage my clients to do that too, because that means if you think of it as a small town, then you can pick up the phone and call somebody. You call the Secretary of State's office. You can call the local banks. You can just think of it as an extended, great, big, small town. And you're going to treat Vermont, I think, in the way that it should be treated.
Mhm. So if you're thinking of starting a childcare business, somebody might be watching right now, and they don't have business experience. I think people get intimidated by the word business, especially if they've been like a teacher or thinking about working with kids. Where do you get started? You pick up the phone and call someone? Are there resources? Where would you recommend people start their journey or their research around what does it mean to start a business?
I mean, I don't always mean to go first, and Eyad, we can switch off. I'll go on first on this one. You go first on the next one.
That's totally fine. I don't mind at all.
I mean, I think, first of all, we have Let's Grow Kids here. So I would definitely be making a call to Let's Grow Kids. Their whole, outreach is to get more childcare into the state of Vermont. So they're going to be more up to date on requirements and all of the things that you need to do in terms of, ratio of teachers to children and ratio of teachers to children to age groups of children and the kinds of square footage requirements you need and those kinds of things. Those, I think we work in conjunction with Let's Grow Kids a lot. We do a lot of training into Let's Grow Kids as well. But I think in terms of just I want to think about the business of this. You can call either one of us. I mean, I start from a very simplistic way, which is I look at a business as having 4 legs. I look at it as being a stable table that has 4 legs, and I want it to be sustainable and successful and satisfying. And people often ask me how I define successful. And I define successful on something that is both sustainable and satisfying to you. I don't care if it's a business that nets $40,000 a year or it's a business that nets $2 million a year. That's irrelevant to me. I don't base success on that. I base success on what the person who's starting the business needs. So the first leg of my table is lifestyle. How does this fit? Where does this fit? What kind of support do you have? Especially with childcare. I think this becomes a really important question. It does for all of my small business owners, but what kind of support do you have? And, who in your family is glad you're going to be adding 3 more kids to the household during the day? And, what kind of backups do you have? And do you have enough time? I mean, we have an exercise called the 168, which is every person, this is the place we all share the same number. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can't make more time. You can buy more time, but you can't make more time. So we try to get down to how many hours do you really have to do this business? Then the second leg is the idea. Is childcare a good idea? Always. Especially caring and compassionate and loving childcare, obviously. The third leg of the table is who needs it and who else does it. So that's kind of the market questions. Again, in Vermont right now, we don't have nearly enough childcare. So you're not going to have, if you want to start a childcare facility right now, you're not going to have a hard time getting people to want to come. The fourth leg is, do the numbers work? And that's both the numbers of the business and your personal numbers. So I actually start people with having them provide me with a personal budget. And somebody said to me once, you're pretty nosy. And I went, no, I'm not nosy at all. But if you bring me a business that the net profit, so not the gross revenues, not I've got 3 kids who are paying me, $200 a week. And so I'm going to make $600. Not that number. What are you going to make after you take all of your expenses out? If that net number doesn't cover what you need for your family, whether it's just you're part of the contribution of the family or you're the whole support of the family, then the table falls apart. The legs aren't sturdy enough, and it's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be successful, and it sure as heck isn't going to be satisfying. So I start from a very basic place right there. And if we can't sort of satisfy right from the very beginning, those four legs and get a good solid handle on them, which takes some time, then we need to roll up our sleeves and do some more work together.
Yeah, that's very practical.
And I think I can add teeny tiny bit of what Debra just mentioned. And I think the first thing to do when thinking about starting a childcare center is to understand what are the available resources for you. So an RDC can be a resource for you to reach out to learn what is available. SBDC, Vermont SBDC specifically, can also be that other resource, plus all the childcare centers and Let's Grow Children's. There's plenty of resources out there. And I think that's the first step. And then understanding those requirements that Debra just mentioned, finding location if they were not operating from home, finding location that fits all of these requirements, getting some insurance information, understanding that they might need lawyer, an accountant, a CPA, maybe a marketing person to help them with that process, and then reaching to the point where they need to develop some sort of financial analysis. And that might sound scary, but the resources such as Vermont SBDC and BDCC can help you with that for free. It's not a paid service, it's a free service, and we're open to accept anyone. And then the last step would be building the business plan. I'm sorry, Debra, I cut you off.
No, please. I'm so glad. I would say that, yes, all of those steps need to be taken. And what Eyad and I both know is that there's an order to take those in. And frankly, when I'm working with a child care center, one of the very first things I check before we even bother to do all of the numbers or talk to the insurance agents or do any of those things is, what is your local zoning? Because a lot of people don't understand that there's a lot of zoning restraints and constrictions in the state of Vermont, and particularly around childcare. So for instance, I was working with someone who was really excited, and we had already started doing the numbers, very intelligent human being, felt like there was a need, had children of an age group that it would be a nice mix. And they had started building this set of numbers based on a number of children. And I said, I don't think your town allows that many children in a private home. And they went to the zoning, and indeed they were basing their numbers on 4 more children than they could have.
Oh, wow.
And so that changed it. So they actually weren't able to do it there. So zoning, very, very, very important first step. And then fire marshal. This is another one that people don't understand, that the restrictions around this are extremely complex. And if, I had someone who had a great idea, again, really qualified, had all of the right impetus and desire to do it, but was on a second floor. And a second floor in childcare immediately requires sprinkler systems. And if you don't have a sprinkler system, you're talking about a massive investment right off the bat. So there's a couple of things, like in all businesses, where you have to check the boxes off and go, and then if you know how many, what the number is, and that you can have in your town, and then you find out what's the square footage requirements per child by the state. And then you can figure out how many numbers you can have. And then you figure out that the fire marshal is going to sign off on it without an enormous amount of financial, structural changes from you. Then for me, I'll start taking the next steps with you. But it's heartbreaking to get further down the road and get all excited and then find out that those things, you can't do it in your home because of those 2 restrictions. So in childcare, it's a little different. Zoning is always important for any business. I mean, it is one of the reasons why in the 11 years I've been doing this, frankly, that businesses one of the major reasons why businesses have not started is that there have been some kind of zoning restriction that have allowed that if, have changed or have forced them to change, the thought process that they were having. So it's one of the reasons, but it comes up a lot.
Mhm.
And if you have to get a change of use, which is another thing, then that's a long process, which requires all of your neighbors signing off. And there are markers along that. And so I will say to people, I don't want you to spend a dime, not a dime, unless it's on a lawyer to help you with a change of use, but I don't want you to spend any money until you get not the zoning person saying, because I've had this happen before, no, that looks like it's going to be fine. Not the zoning person saying it's going to be fine, but all of the abutters saying it's going to be fine, and all of the paperwork tied off and everybody's signatures on it, and here's your change of use, and I can see it. Now we can start the process.
Mhm. Those are great points. So fire marshal, zoning, I mean, I do think some people, worry about things like they have I have to have a fence, or I might have to do some big capital expenditures, but I actually, Deborah, have not heard anybody get to that level. So it's very helpful to hear, like, that's a very practical thing for people to explore. So, and is a business, Eyad, you'd mentioned getting a good solid business plan is in place. I think people throw around business plan in lots of different ways, but what I heard you all describe that I think is interesting is there's the numbers part of it, but there's this process, like some of it's a little bit linear, that check these boxes first and then start doing numbers. And then, it's iterative and leads to other processes. When you say business plan, in your mind, is that just the numbers, or is it sort of all of those pieces? Is there a map that you follow? How does that work?
Yeah, so when we talk about a business plan, technically we are talking about every single aspect of the business itself, including the financial or the numbers as is. So when we start with a business plan, we will try to define, first of all, what is the problem that business is trying to solve. With the childcare center, that's straightforward, very easy. And so that's a real problem that everyone is dealing with and struggle here in Vermont. And so the second step would be finding that solution, which is the business themselves. The business plan will help the business owner or entrepreneurs to kind of identify their brand based on where they want to position themselves in the market. Are they going to target maybe like high income individuals versus low income? So all of that plays a role. And all of that comes from doing market research. And I cannot emphasize how critical this step is. I've dealt with a lot of business owners who just their gut feeling has led them to creating the business and did not rely on data from the market, did not do their homework of researching what's out there and how they can improve that, what is needed. And so that all trickles down to them failing in their businesses. So going back to problem and solution, then finding out what is the structure of their business, developing a marketing plan. And that can be intimidating for some people, but it all starts with the marketing research, understanding what is needed, and then developing strategies to kind of target those points that their research found. And then operation, understanding what are the processes. You cannot open childcare center and not have for instance, a contract, or understanding how you will have the intake, what sets with child goes when and how, and all of that. So understanding that there should be procedures and should be policies implemented so that you're ensuring that everyone is happy, everyone's safe, and everyone is growing healthy and happy and becoming a community member. And then the last thing would become to talk about financials and financial projection. And when it comes to that point, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot and I talk speed, but when it comes to numbers, I've dealt with a lot of business owners. Few of them were in childcare center where they just thought about their revenue and thought about maybe just the salaries. And if they have to pay rent, just that. And that is, and they looked, oh, that seems like a great business. I'm going to go do it. And they start investing money towards that. But they disregarded the list of expenses that they have to pay, or the list of legal documents that they have to file and pay for. And all of that takes away from their income. So when we talk about financial analysis, let's not focus on the revenue number, but rather how can you make it work? What is needed now? What you can put on hold for now? And what is the long-term project?
So I'm gonna add some things. I think when people think of a business plan, there's kind of a very old-fashioned business plan, which banks actually still require, which has a lot of narrative pieces to it. If someone's going to go to bank all the way to needing to do commercial financing, then we're going to have them do the entire business plan. We're going to have them do all of the components that the bank wants. It's going to be pretty. It's going to be typed all out. It's going to have tabs. If you're not going to bank financing, we're going to use a shortcut. The business model canvas is usually where we start, which is all on one page. I want you to answer all the questions, the marketing questions, the operation questions, the same things that Eyad is talking about, but I don't want you spending 6 months writing a beautiful plan with a notebook with tabs in it, because then you're going to be married to it and I'm not going to be able to talk you out of it and sometimes our job is to get you not to do it. That we count that as the same level of success sometimes as we do start having people start, because I don't want you coming back 6 months from now with huge credit card bills because you've been charging things on your credit card, or you took out a home equity line of credit on your house and you can't pay that bill. I don't want you in that position. I want you to know before you start that you're spending money wisely and it's going to work. Now that childcare is slightly different than other businesses. Childcare centers can break even much more quickly than other businesses because the demand is there if the numbers work. Other businesses have what we call longer runways to break even. So we also want people to have a sizable chunk of working capital that they can count on while their business is getting traction. But I'm not going to make you write all of that down. I'm going to ask you all of it. I'm going to collect a lot of that information. You're going to collect a lot of that information. You're going to know the answers to all of those. And the answers to all of those are what build the numbers. And so I think people see the narrative and the financials as two separate things. And it's really that all of the answers to the questions that Eyad and I have been talking about are the things that allow you to create the financials. And Eyad has a tool for that. We have a tool for that. There are different ways of doing it. But basically, I will ask you all of those questions, get all of those answers, and then I'll have you do a very quick back of the envelope. Let's just do it annually. Let's see what those annual numbers might look like. And then if those look like they work, now we'll take the next step and we'll go to what monthly numbers look like and what seasonality is going to affect you and all of those other kinds of things that that businesses in Vermont have to deal with, because frankly, every business in Vermont is a seasonal business regardless, because you're either dealing with tourists or you're dealing with the people who deal with tourists. So, eventually there's some seasonality to every business. And, so it all goes together, but whether you actually write out all of that narrative or not really depends on whether you need to go to bank financing. If you need to go to bank financing, you're going to write it all out. And again, we have templates and things that you can use, but I'm not going to waste a lot of time getting it all pretty unless you're going to a bank. I'm going to spend more time on the numbers. The numbers for me are always going to be pretty, because I'm fond of saying to my clients, numbers. And I've again been doing this 11 years, and I have heard every excuse you can possibly imagine why the numbers are hard to do. And I don't understand numbers and nobody ever taught me. And, I've heard them all. And to all of them, I say, I appreciate that. I understand your fourth grade teacher was terrible. I get all of those things. However, numbers is the one language of business that you must learn, because it's the most eloquent and the most truthful. Everything else can be anecdotal. And Eyad and I have both heard more than once, but everyone says they'll come. Okay, well, everyone is probably your family, first off, and everyone coming is not a market survey. That everyone said, Well, I need to meet everyone then.
Yeah.
I need some data about everyone.
Yeah.
So, we try to make it, look, we don't teach entrepreneurship in schools, and we're starting to. I mean, we have a training program for teachers. We're trying to get entrepreneurship into grade school, because this is when kids start to dream about what they're going to do with their lives. I mean, I was going to be an astronaut, but I mean, we all had those kinds of dreams, but we don't teach people this. We don't teach them about, revenue only comes from one place. It's how many people, how often, and how much. All businesses are like that. How many kids, how often are they coming? How much are they going to pay you? That's revenue. And then what does it cost to deliver that service? All of the things, as Eyad said, around that service, that's expenses. The difference between those two is net profit. Net profit's the number that you live off of. That's your number. That's the only number you've got. So, we don't teach that in school. So we spend a lot of time on early financial literacy with people. We have no judgment about this. Everybody at our job in the SBDC in Vermont, and I'm sure Eyad would say the same thing for all of the people at BDCC, we wouldn't be working with small business if we didn't love entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't be doing it. We could all do something else. We all have degrees in something else. We've all run our own businesses. We all could be doing something else. We do this because entrepreneurs are fabulous to work with, and they have dreams, and we want to support them, but we don't want them to tank your house or your mother's house. Right.
Yes, indeed. That support will kind of trickle down to the community as a whole. And once you have that vibrancy in the community, then everyone wants to support entrepreneurs and small businesses and would push them also to start their own businesses. I just want to touch on a few things as Debra was talking. For instance, PDCC has a program that reach out to high schools and actually works with the 3 high schools here in the region that is called P3, which is Pipeline and Pathway Program, which is prepare high schoolers to being part of the workforce. So they help them develop the skills needed, build the CV, mock interviews, job fairs, and all of that, just to get them to the part where they feel like they are going to be financially independent, and they need to do that and achieve that. And also that program helped them develop some skills needed for entrepreneurship endeavors if needed. I also want to share something, and I will ask Debra probably an indirect question. Through my work with a lot of these entrepreneurs and small business owners, through the process of developing the business plan, and that goes back to why it's important to have a business plan, a lot of business owners come up with creative idea once you ask them a question and put them under like the spotlight that they wouldn't have thought about otherwise. In some cases, while doing the financial review and trying to understand what is that and what is feasible, what is not, they come up with creative solution, maybe adding a revenue stream, adding services, charging for something, increasing prices, decreasing prices so they can sell more. So they become very, very creative during that process. That maybe the stress that comes with that big word, building a business plan, kind of push them. But it's really marvelous to see how just that change within 2-3 weeks happens quickly, and people get super creative and super supportive of their businesses, of course, if it is financially stable and profitable.
Mm-hmm. Well, you both are using the word entrepreneur a lot, and this is, for better or worse, it's lots of women who are getting in, who think about childcare. So, typically female-dominated field, and I think the numbers piece, math, Debra, just really resonates. Like, ooh, math, ooh, numbers, and so, but really, people do have great ideas. And what I'm hearing you all say is you are providing a mechanism or a channel to sort of vet those ideas and bring them to fruition if it's possible. And so, finding those sparks, like that does sound really rewarding, finding the spark and helping it be realistic, not being sort of, you have to be responsible about that, but it's that spirit or, again, you say creativity, but and I think that is all wrapped up in entrepreneurship, that what is that, which is a big word. It's like, how can we just people really do have that energy. You have a good idea. Where can you find people to help you make it come true? So
one of the first things you can do with us is we have a class called Starting Your Own Small Business that pre-COVID was 4 hours in person. I taught it a lot. We taught it in each of our regions, but in COVID, we put it online and now it's free. So I really encourage people to go and take that class. It's really worth thinking about. We talk about the does it have legs piece. We talk about, there's a lot of questions that people ask in the beginning of the process that are not important to ask at the beginning of the process. And there's a lot of questions they don't ask that they should be asking. So we try to sort of put it in the right order. And then once you go through that class, you get hooked up with one of the advisors, and then, we can help you take the next steps. But you can take it online. You can go to a group class online, or you can take it privately online. There's a long booklet that's there that you can go through slowly if you want. But I think the fear comes from, I've never done anything like this. And if I don't think of it as a business, then I don't have to worry about any of those things. And the reality is, especially when you're working with children, you definitely have to think about it as a business, and you definitely have to answer the big, important questions. Because if not, there's a lot of not so great consequences. So I think, getting hooked up with one of us, and then again, Let's Grow Kids, who knows the ins and outs of all of the, just how many teachers do you need, and what do they need to be, certified in, and what's the square footage requirements. And, because infants are very different than toddlers and very different than preschoolers. So, all of those things, we really encourage you to use their resources, because they're great and they know what the situation is. So I think, and then also I think one of the big important things for any person considering doing business for themselves is, why am I doing it? And again, that lifestyle, like for me, why am I doing it? What's the satisfaction level going to be? How does it fit into my own life and family? I often boil that leg down to, who do you love and what do they need from you? And how much sleep do you need?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because when you take away all of those things, and again, Chloe, to your point, women often have a lot of people. When I ask that question, there's a lot of people on that list often, especially if you're in a generation in which you still have children at home and you have aging parents. It can become you can have an enormous number of people's needs on your list. And so where does this fit? And then when I say what's left for sleep, I'm not kidding. I want to know what that number is. Because again, all of those things need to be considered. And I think women as a whole don't consider that as much as maybe we should. Mm-hmm. The other thing is we live in this country where, yes, put another thing on your to-do list, put another thing on your to-do list, put another thing on your to-do list. Well, the reality is, every time you put something new on your to-do list, you really need to take something off your to-do list. Mm-hmm. You just can't keep putting it on. And so that's the other reason why I put that leg of the table first. Mm-hmm. I don't put it last. I put it first. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think it's a really good point too around, it can sound like, oh, I have my own kid. Why don't I take in a couple more kids and then it will be, it won't be hard. And that's, definitely, it is a business. It's a very serious business. You have to take it seriously. It doesn't mean that it's impossible, but I think, part of the goal here is to really, help. Again, I think, I'm not sure people who open childcares have thought of themselves as businesses. So to make sure that, because these are the kinds of questions that you might not even get. There are groups locally that mentor each other, home providers who connect. One of our series has the local licensor did, so how to connect with those kinds of resources. But it's a big decision too. All those things are not to be taken lightly.
And I think giving yourself enough time. I think that sometimes we also put things on our list and then we put an unrealistic deadline on those things. And so giving yourself enough time to go through the process, to know that you've done it all. And, one of the things I have people do is an old-fashioned timeline. I mean, sometimes people look at me like, what are you talking about? But when do you want to open? Now let's back it up and see all the things that you have to do before you open, all the decisions that need to be made, all the things that need to line up. If you're going to be in your home, but you need, the fire marshal comes and you need exit signs and you need a different kind of door and you need an electrician and then maybe you need sinks. And so you need a plumber. What are all of those things line up for? And then who's going to do them and what is it going to cost? Because as Eyad was saying, there's groups of costs and there's a thing called startup costs, which are all of the monies that you need to spend on your business before anyone pays you a dime. So knowing what those are, knowing when you're going to need them, understanding whether you have enough money for them or a source for that money that you can either, pay back or, and how long is that going to take you? So we help you look at all of those things in terms of, is this the right decision? And sometimes, I've had people go through this whole process and go, I really wanted to do it. I just think now that I understand what everything that's involved, it's the wrong time. I'm going to wait 2 years. In those 2 years, I'm going to save a little bit more money. I'm going to, so that can be. Now, I understand that there's an enormous amount of pressure on the childcare system. And so that makes this, for a lot of people, feel like the perfect opportunity. And it could certainly be. And so what we'll do is just help you determine whether that's true for you or not.
Great.
And sometimes the mean can be different. For instance, I've had a client that I was working with, and I'm sorry, I call them clients, entrepreneur that I'm working with, specifically in childcare center. And they had the idea that they want to buy a full building from the get-go and develop that and change that into a childcare center. And as Debra just mentioned, that there's that startup expense that they kind of thought about, not really. So they wanted to invest all of I think it was around $500,000 to buy that building, and that does not include any fit up costs. So then they will have to put the fence, buy the toys, make sure that it's up to code, make sure that they meet the requirements. So there's a lot going on. And if they just thought about it and went and got the building, then they might have put themselves in a big hole. So just reaching out to the resources, making sure that everyone is aware that this is what you're trying to do, and finding the right means. So for that business, for instance, the suggestion was maybe buying the building on a site for now, and you can look for location to rent, something that is already ready or equipped for childcare center. And maybe if you have extra room in your house that you can turn into a childcare center, and then that's another solution. So you can start with small steps until your business is ready to take bigger endeavor and provide or generate the revenue or the income that you were hoping for from that.
And the other piece of what Eyad is saying is, if they had taken all of their cash and they had used it to purchase the building, and they didn't look at all the other expenses that were going to follow that, and now they've tied up all of their cash, and maybe they've also had to assume some debt in buying the building. Now they're in a different position with the banks than they would have been if they'd stopped, taken a breath, and decided how much capital they had and what were the total costs of the project, when those monies were going to be needed, and where was the right source for filling in gaps. Because commercial lending, we were talking about this on our call this morning with our advisor team, has a call, and we were talking about the fact that we spend a fair amount of time talking to people about what commercial lending is like, because most people don't ever deal with a commercial lending situation. And the only situation they've ever dealt with in lending is they've gone and gotten a home loan or a car loan. And commercial lending couldn't be more different than those two scenarios. And so coming to us who understand how deals get put together and, who needs to be in them. We have a fond saying, we talk about revenue stacks, because it's also very rarely, sometimes it is, but not as often as you would think, one bank that gives you the money that you need. It's a variety of things that go together. And the reason we call it a stack is who is in that first position and who comes underneath them. That's an art form to figure out all of that. And so that's another reason to, take a breath. Someone asked me the other day, what was my best piece of business advice that I could give after 11 years? And I said, to embrace the pause. Literally, if I could just get people to pause and take a breath and just gather all the information. And then once they have it, take another breath. And, and sometimes it's emergencies like COVID or Irene that force the pause, other times it's, something happening in the family. But if you can internalize that and do it yourself and not have to have it come from an outside place, then I've done my job if I've gotten you to do that.
And I think Debra would also agree on that point that I'm about to say, is that don't spend a dime without getting back to your business counselor or business technical assistance provider, because you might not be aware of what that is for you and your business. I've seen a lot of people come to us just with huge debts in credit cards that they spent on their businesses, but technically we cannot support credit cards under personal names. So it's really complicated. So please, if you're watching and you're thinking about spending money, talk to your business advisor first. Just make sure that it's the right decision. It might look like right for you now, but let's check it. Let's confirm it.
Great.
And credit cards are not the best way. I would both tell you, credit cards are not the best funding source for your business. A business credit card, once you're in business, that's a different situation. Using that in a very particular way can help you, but it's not using your personal credit cards to start your business is not our preferred method of, and also asking your parents. I have a whole set of rules about borrowing money from families, because I think that's another, as parents, we are genetically predisposed to say yes. And so we're going to say yes, but it's probably not, it's not always the right answer. So come to us and let us put you through the paces of that before you, and sometimes parents are willing to help. And if it's done in a particular way, it can be all right, but it really needs to have structure to it.
So it sounds like this has been really great advice. And Debra, you are full of sound bites of wisdom. I'm like trying to write them down so I can remember them. I have them roll across the screen. But it sounds like the starting your own business class online would be a really great place where some of these tools would get.
Right. So go to btsbdc.org and look for the starting your own small business class. Go down to classes and workshops at the top, pull it down. It's the first thing you're going to see.
Great.
Sign up for that. Again, you can take it. If you sign up, you can take it anytime online, or you can sign up for a group Zoom and meet some other people and talk. And then again, that gets you to one of us, because there are several of us around the state.
And I can also add to that point, we are launching our cohort for business planning and starting your own business as well. So if someone is looking to start their own business, they can go to our website and send us an inquiry, and we can definitely put them into that cohort. So the website is brattleborodevelopment.com. Go under services, there's business services, and send us an inquiry.
Great. This has been so great. Thank you all for taking time. It's really, I actually learned a lot. Again, I was taking notes. It's really helpful. And I hope it will help people be inspired in our region to maybe jump in, do something. So.
And I know that probably we talked about, I'm sorry, I cut you off, Chloe. I know that lending is the last resource that you should tap into when starting your business or borrowing money. But I also want to say that we have the SBA micro lending program, specifically lend to childcare centers as a nonprofit and for profit. So it's a good resource to tap into if needed, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for that time, Chloe. Thank you. Lovely seeing you again, Debra.
Thank you, Eyad. Nice to see you too. And Chloe, thank you very much. And if you have any questions after you review this, please let us know and we'll fill in the blanks for you. And I think you have our email addresses. You're perfectly welcome to share mine with anyone. And we look forward to helping.
Great. Thank you so much.